It started like any other night out with friends, an invitation to one of those parties that had become a staple of our social circle over the years. Amanda, my wife of 7 years, seemed particularly excited about this one. She spent an unusual amount of time getting ready, trying on multiple outfits before finally settling on a sleek black dress that hugged her figure in a way that made me do a double take. "You look amazing," I told her as she added the finishing touches to her makeup. "Thanks," she said with a coy smile, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. "It's going to be a fun night. I can feel it." I brushed off the subtle unease that crept into my thoughts. Maybe Amanda just needed a night to blow off steam. Work had been stressful for her lately, and we hadn't had much quality time together. I hoped the party would be a chance for us to reconnect. The house belonged to Jake and Melissa, an outgoing couple who were known for throwing extravagant parties. Their modern, sprawling home was packed with guests when we arrived, the sound of laughter and music spilling out onto the well-lit patio. Amanda slipped her arm through mine as we stepped inside, her grip firmer than usual. We were greeted by Melissa, who handed us each a drink and ushered us into the main living area. "You two are going to have so much fun tonight," she said with a wink that I chalked up to her usual over-the-top enthusiasm. Amanda mingled effortlessly, chatting with a group of friends while I lingered near the bar, catching up with an old co-worker who had also been invited. As the evening progressed, I noticed something peculiar about the energy in the room. People were laughing and talking, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something that felt secretive and charged. It wasn't until Melissa clinked her glass and called for everyone's attention that the true nature of the evening became clear. She stood in the center of the room, a mischievous grin on her face, holding a large crystal bowl. "All right, everyone," she began, her voice cutting through the chatter. "You know what time it is? Let's make this interesting." A ripple of laughter and murmured agreement spread through the crowd. I glanced at Amanda, whose smile seemed forced now, her gaze fixed on Melissa. "We're going to play our little game," Melissa continued, shaking the bowl for emphasis. "Keys in, ladies and gentlemen. You know the drill." My confusion must have been evident because the co-worker beside me chuckled and leaned in. "You've never been to one of their key parties before?" "Key parties?" I repeated, my stomach dropping. He nodded, clearly amused. "Yeah, you toss your car keys into the bowl, and at the end of the night, everyone draws a pair. Whoever's keys you pick. Well, you spend the night with them." I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh and tell me it was a joke. But he didn't. I turned to Amanda, my pulse quickening. "Did you know about this?" She avoided my eyes, her cheeks flushed. "Jake and Melissa mentioned it," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the buzz of the room. "I didn't think it was a big deal." "Not a big deal," I hissed, trying to keep my voice low. "You didn't think to tell me that this was the kind of party we were coming to?" "I didn't know how you'd react," she said, looking genuinely uncomfortable now. "I thought maybe we'd see how it goes." "See how it goes?" I repeated, my disbelief mounting. "You're okay with this?" She bit her lip, her silence speaking volumes. Melissa's voice interrupted us. "All right, everyone, keys in, and let's get started." The room erupted in applause as people began tossing their keys into the bowl, some with exaggerated gestures and playful remarks. My mind raced as I watched the scene unfold, feeling like I was in a surreal alternate reality. Amanda looked at me, her expression unreadable. "We don't have to do it if you don't want to," she said finally. "But I thought it might be interesting. Something new." I stared at her, a mix of anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "You should have talked to me about this first, Amanda. This isn't something you just spring on someone." "I know," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I thought it could be fun. For both of us." I shook my head, unable to process the situation. "I need some air." I stepped out onto the patio, the cool night air hitting me like a slap in the face. My thoughts were a chaotic mess of disbelief, anger, and betrayal. How could Amanda think this was okay? How could she keep something like this from me? A few minutes later, Amanda joined me, her arms crossed defensively. "Daniel, I didn't mean to upset you." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Did you think I'd just go along with it? That I'd be fine watching you leave with some stranger?" "It's not about leaving you," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. It's about trying something different, breaking out of our routine. This isn't just different, Amanda. This is betrayal. You knew how I'd feel, and you brought me here anyway. She looked away, tears glistening in her eyes. I didn't think it would be this big of a deal. I thought maybe it would bring us closer. Closer? I said incredulously. This isn't closeness. This is tearing us apart. The party continued inside, oblivious to the turmoil brewing on the patio. I could hear Melissa's laughter and the clinking of glasses, but it all felt distant, like background noise in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Amanda reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I can't do this, I said, my voice heavy with finality. I don't even recognize the person you're being right now. Her shoulders slumped, and she looked down at her feet. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I just wanted something more. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You've definitely made tonight unforgettable. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there as I headed for the car. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Things between us would never be the same again. As I stood outside on the patio, the cold night air biting at my skin, I knew I had a choice to make. The party continued behind me, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoing through the open sliding door. Amanda had followed me outside after our heated argument about the nature of the event, but her silence spoke louder than any words she could have offered. When I finally turned to face her, her arms were crossed over her chest, and her eyes were wide with a mix of defiance and guilt. The woman I had trusted for years, the partner I had built my life with, was suddenly a stranger to me. Amanda, I said, my voice calm but firm, we need to leave. Now. Her expression faltered. Daniel, you're overreacting. It's just a party. No, it's not, I snapped. You lied to me about what this was. You brought me here knowing full well what would happen, and you didn't think I deserved to know? How is that okay? She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to the ground. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. I thought if you saw how casual it was, you'd understand. Understand? I repeated, incredulous. Understand that my wife is okay with tossing her keys into a bowl and spending the night with some stranger? Amanda, this isn't just about the party. It's about trust. You've shattered it. Her jaw tightened, and she looked up at me, her eyes hardening. I didn't shatter anything. I was honest about wanting to try something new. You're the one who's making this into a big deal. I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. You think this isn't a big deal? You think this is something we can just brush off and move on from? She sighed, rubbing her temples. Daniel, you're blowing this way out of proportion. If you don't want to participate, that's fine. But I don't want to leave. I want to stay. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a step back, my breath catching in my chest. You want to stay? I said, my voice shaking with anger. Even after everything I just said? Yes, she said, her tone steady. I came here tonight because I wanted to explore something different. And I'm not going to let your insecurities stop me. Insecurities? I said, my voice rising. You're calling this an insecurity? Amanda, this isn't just about me. This is about us. Our marriage. If you stay here tonight, I don't know how we come back from this. Her silence was deafening. She looked away, refusing to meet my eyes, and in that moment, I felt a chasm open between us, one that I wasn't sure we could ever bridge. I stormed back into the house, determined to grab my coat and leave. The living room was buzzing with activity, the bowl of keys now full, and Melissa gleefully calling out names as people drew their matches. I avoided eye contact with anyone, my focus solely on retrieving my jacket from the hall closet. But as I turned to leave, Mark, one of the party hosts, stepped into my path. His expression was friendly, but there was a calculating edge to his tone. Hey man, everything okay? You seemed upset earlier. Everything's fine, I said curtly, trying to sidestep him. He blocked my way, his grin never faltering. Come on, don't be like that. These parties are meant to be fun. No pressure, no judgment. Just a chance to let loose. I'm not interested, I said firmly. And neither should Amanda be. Mark raised an eyebrow, his smile widening. Ah, so that's what this is about. Look, I get it. The first time can be intimidating. But trust me, everyone here is respectful. If you're not into it, that's totally fine. No one's forcing you. I said I'm not interested. I repeated, my tone colder. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm leaving. Mark shrugged, stepping aside. Suit yourself. But you might want to talk to Amanda before you go. She seems pretty committed to staying. The weight of his words settled heavily on my shoulders as I stepped out the front door and into the night. My car was parked down the street, and for a moment I stood frozen, staring at it as if crossing the distance would make this all go away. But it wouldn't. The damage had been done, and the realization that Amanda was willing to stay, despite my ultimatum, was like a dagger to the heart. I didn't leave right away. Instead, I leaned against the hood of my car, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I thought I knew so well decided that this was something she wanted, something she was willing to risk our marriage for? After what felt like an eternity, I saw Amanda step out onto the porch. For a brief moment, I thought she was coming after me, that she'd changed her mind. But she didn't come toward me. Instead, she stood there, her phone in her hand, glancing back toward the house as if weighing her options. She didn't choose me. She turned and went back inside, the door closing softly behind her. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached, and my chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. By the time I reached our house, I was emotionally drained, my mind numb with disbelief. I sat in the driveway for what felt like hours, staring at the darkened windows of our home. This was supposed to be our sanctuary, the place where we built a life together. But now, it felt like a hollow shell, a reminder of everything that had been lost in a single night. When I finally went inside, the silence was deafening. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. Amanda's choice to stay at that party had changed everything. There was no going back from this. The hours dragged on, and at some point, exhaustion overtook me. I fell asleep on the couch, only to be jolted awake by the sound of the front door creaking open. The faint glow of early morning filtered through the curtains as Amanda stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She froze when she saw me, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "You're still up?" she asked quietly. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood, my gaze locked on hers. "Why?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep and emotion. "Why did you stay?" She hesitated, looking away. "I don't know," she said finally. I felt like I needed to." "Needed to?" I repeated, my anger flaring again. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What this means for us?" "I didn't do anything," she said defensively. "I stayed to see what it was like. That's all. That's all," I said, my voice rising. "Amanda, you made a choice that told me exactly where I stand in your priorities. Do you even care about what this is doing to our marriage?" Her silence was answer enough. That morning marked the beginning of the end. The trust we had once shared was gone, replaced by a chasm of resentment and betrayal that neither of us seemed willing or able to bridge. I couldn't shake the image of her standing on that porch, choosing to stay as I walked away. It was a choice that would haunt me for weeks, months, and perhaps even years to come. By the time I arrived home, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me like a lead blanket. My hands trembled as I turned the key in the lock, stepping into the quiet, dimly lit space that had once felt like a sanctuary. Now, it was suffocating, a place that held memories of a marriage I could no longer believe in. I walked into the bedroom and flicked on the light, my gaze immediately landing on the neatly made bed. The sight of it, our shared space, now tainted by Amanda's choices, set something off inside me. Anger, sadness, disbelief, they all swirled together, overwhelming and unbearable. My eyes fell on the small, locked drawer in the corner of our closet where we kept important documents. I opened it and pulled out our marriage certificate, the heavy paper embossed with our names and the date of our wedding. I held it in my hands, staring at it for what felt like an eternity. This piece of paper had once represented hope, love, and commitment. Now it felt like a cruel joke. Without thinking, I ripped it down the center. The sound was oddly satisfying, so I ripped it again, and then again, until the pieces were small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. I grabbed my wedding ring, the symbol of promises Amanda had so willingly broken, and placed both the torn certificate and the ring on her pillow. It felt symbolic, like I was returning the weight of our shattered vows to her. I stepped back, staring at the bed, and felt an emptiness creep in. It wasn't the satisfying catharsis I'd hoped for. Instead, it was a hollow ache, one that spread through my chest and made it hard to breathe. As I left the bedroom and walked into the living room, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze, knowing instinctively who it would be. Sure enough, Amanda's name flashed on the screen. I debated whether to pick up, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But before I could make a decision, the call went to voicemail. The phone buzzed again, this time signaling a new voice message. My stomach churned as I stared at the notification, unsure if I could handle hearing what she had to say. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I pressed play. "Hey, Daniel," her voice began, soft but tinged with an undercurrent of exhilaration. "I just wanted to check in and, talk. Tonight was wow. It was definitely something. I mean, I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but honestly, it was exciting." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto the couch, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I know you're upset," she continued, her tone shifting to something almost apologetic. "And I get it, I do. But I wish you could have stayed, Daniel. You might have seen it differently if you'd just given it a chance. Everyone was so open, so free. It's hard to explain, but it felt like I was a part of something bigger." My jaw clenched, the ache in my chest intensifying. She didn't sound remorseful. She didn't sound like someone who understood the gravity of what she'd done. She sounded like someone who had already moved on from the life we'd built together. "I know this probably isn't what you want to hear," she went on, "but I felt alive tonight. Like I've been missing something, and I finally found it. I just hope we can talk about this when I get home. I really think we can work through it." The message ended with a click, leaving me in a silence that felt deafening. My hands shook as I set the phone down on the coffee table, my mind racing. She wanted to talk about it? After everything she'd said, everything she'd done? How could she be so blind to the damage she was causing? I stood and began pacing the room, my thoughts spiraling out of control. The woman I had loved, the person I had trusted with my life, had willingly torn us apart. And for what? A fleeting sense of freedom? A chance to feel alive? Her words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. Unable to stay still, I grabbed my keys and left the house, needing to escape the suffocating space. I drove aimlessly through the empty streets, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, the vacations, the late-night talks about our future. How had it come to this? Eventually, I found myself parked at a quiet overlook on the edge of town. The city lights stretched out before me, a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying Amanda's voicemail over and over in my mind. Each time it hurt more. The sun was beginning to rise when I finally drove back home. The house was still dark when I stepped inside, the silence oppressive. I glanced toward the bedroom, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. Instead, I sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally taking over. When I woke hours later, the sunlight streaming through the windows was almost blinding. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, my body aching from the restless night. The sound of the front door opening made me freeze. Amanda was home. She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she set her bag down. When she saw me on the couch, she hesitated, her expression unreadable. "Daniel," she began, her voice cautious. "Can we talk?" I stood, my gaze cold and unwavering. "I think you said enough last night." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and played the voicemail, watching as her face shifted from confusion to realization. When it ended, she looked at me, her eyes wide. "You listened to that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I did," I said, my tone sharp. "And you know what I heard? I heard someone who doesn't care about what she's done. Someone who doesn't care about this marriage." "That's not true," she said quickly, stepping closer. "I do care, Daniel. I just—" "No," I said, cutting her off. "You don't get to justify this. You made your choice last night, Amanda. And I'm making mine." Her eyes flicked toward the bedroom, where the torn certificate and ring still sat on the pillow. When she looked back at me, tears filled her eyes. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "We can fix this." I shook my head, my voice firm. "There's nothing left to fix." The finality of my words hung in the air as I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving Amanda standing in the middle of the room. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. This was the end. And as painful as it was the only choice I had left. The morning after Amanda's return from the party, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her actions destroy me. The betrayal was raw, but it wasn't going to define me. If she wanted to tear apart everything we'd built, I would ensure it was on my terms. That meant one thing: divorce. I spent the better part of the day calling lawyers, sifting through recommendations until I found one who came highly regarded: Claire Davenport. She was known for her no-nonsense attitude and her ability to handle contentious cases with precision. During our first meeting, held in her downtown office, I laid out the situation in painstaking detail. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair after I finished speaking, "your wife has admitted, albeit indirectly, to participating in infidelity at this party. You have a voicemail as evidence, but you'll need more than that if we want to ensure a favorable outcome in court." "What kind of evidence?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "Anything that proves a pattern of behavior," Claire explained. "Messages, photos, videos, witness accounts. Anything that shows she's been unfaithful or that her actions have negatively impacted your marriage. This isn't just about dissolving the relationship. It's about ensuring you come out of this with as much financial and emotional stability as possible." I nodded, the gravity of her words sinking in. "I'll do whatever it takes." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of investigation and preparation. I began collecting evidence, starting with the voicemail Amanda had left me after the party. Claire advised me to document every interaction with Amanda going forward, no matter how small, and to keep all communication civil and factual. "The last thing you want is for her to paint you as volatile," she warned. At the same time, I began digging into Amanda's social circle, particularly the group of friends she'd been spending time with lately. That's when I turned to my closest friend, Kevin, for help. Kevin had always been the kind of guy who could get information out of anyone, and he was more than willing to assist. "This key party thing isn't as uncommon as you'd think," Kevin told me one evening as we pored over Amanda's social media profiles. "I've heard rumors about these kinds of events happening all over the city, but I didn't realize how organized it was until now." "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "There's a whole network," Kevin said. "People who host these parties, share invites, and keep everything under wraps. It's like an underground club. And from what I can tell, Amanda's pretty deep into it." With Kevin's help, I started piecing together the puzzle. Amanda's social media activity, though subtle, hinted at her involvement. Photos from dinner parties and cryptic comments on posts began to take on a new meaning. Kevin even managed to track down a private group on a messaging app that Amanda was a part of, where participants discussed upcoming events and shared their experiences. But the real breakthrough came when Kevin introduced me to an old acquaintance of his named Rachel. Rachel had attended one of these parties a few months prior and was more than willing to share her story. I didn't know what I was getting into at first, Rachel admitted during our meeting at a quiet coffee shop. A friend invited me, and it sounded like just a fun get-together. But when I realized what was happening, I was too uncomfortable to stay. Rachel provided details about the parties, the rules, the atmosphere, and the people involved. She even recognized Amanda from a photo Kevin showed her. "Yeah, I've seen her before," Rachel said. "She's definitely been to at least a couple of these events." Armed with this information, I worked with Claire to build a case. She filed the divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences in Amanda's infidelity as the primary cause. At the same time, Kevin and I continued digging into the larger network of marital exchanges happening in the city. What started as a personal quest for justice quickly revealed a much larger web of deceit and betrayal. Through Kevin's contacts, we uncovered several more individuals who were willing to speak out about the parties. Some had attended out of curiosity, while others had been pressured by their spouses. Their stories were eerily similar: secretive invites, unspoken rules, and a culture of normalization that made it hard to say no. One particularly shocking revelation came from a man named Tom, who had discovered his wife's involvement in the network only after their marriage had fallen apart. "It's like a cult," Tom said during a late-night phone call. "They make it seem like it's all harmless fun, but it destroys relationships. It's ruined more lives than you can imagine." As the divorce proceedings moved forward, Amanda's behavior became increasingly erratic. She accused me of invading her privacy when she discovered I'd uncovered her social media activity, and she attempted to paint herself as the victim during our mediated discussions. But the evidence I'd gathered spoke for itself. The voicemail, combined with testimonies from Rachel and others, painted a clear picture of Amanda's involvement in infidelity and the broader network of marital exchanges. Claire used this evidence strategically, ensuring that Amanda's actions were highlighted without crossing into vindictive territory. During one particularly heated mediation session, Amanda finally snapped. "You're just trying to ruin me," she spat, her eyes blazing with anger. "You can't stand the fact that I wanted something different." "No," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "I can't stand the fact that you lied to me, betrayed me, and thought I wouldn't fight for what's right." The turning point came when Claire presented the evidence to the court. The judge, a stern but fair woman in her 60s, listened carefully as Claire outlined the impact of Amanda's actions on our marriage. When it was Amanda's turn to speak, her arguments came across as defensive and disjointed. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The divorce was granted, and I was awarded a fair division of assets, as well as documentation that protected me from any future financial claims Amanda might try to make. But perhaps the most significant outcome wasn't the legal victory. It was the exposure of the network itself. Kevin, true to his relentless nature, had compiled enough information to bring the issue to the attention of local authorities. While the network wasn't inherently illegal, the fallout from its exposure led to a wave of consequences for those involved. As I walked out of the courthouse on the day the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't thought possible. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I'd done everything in my power to protect myself and hold Amanda accountable. And as for the network of exchanges that had threatened to upend so many lives, Kevin and I had shone a light on it, ensuring that the truth couldn't be hidden any longer. The scandal broke like a thunderclap. A week after my divorce was finalized, the local newspaper, the Bayside Chronicle, ran a front-page story detailing the secret world of key parties and marital exchanges that had quietly infiltrated our city. The headline read, "Behind Closed Doors, the Hidden Network of Infidelity in Bayside." Beneath it was a photo of Jake and Melissa's house, the epicenter of the so-called events. I had known the article was coming. Kevin, ever the detective, had passed his findings to an investigative journalist named Claire Mason, who had been more than eager to dig deeper. Claire had spent weeks gathering testimonies, corroborating evidence, and unearthing the names of prominent partygoers. When she reached out to me, I had been hesitant to get involved. But after learning that Amanda's actions were far from isolated, I realized the story needed to be told. Claire's article painted a vivid picture of the parties, from their secretive invites to the damaging fallout they caused. The piece wasn't just about salacious details. It was about the lives upended, the marriages destroyed, and the ripple effects on families and communities. She quoted Rachel and Tom, whose experiences mirrored my own, and included anonymized accounts from others who had been affected. The reaction was immediate and explosive. By noon, the Bayside Chronicle's website had crashed under the weight of traffic, and the story was being shared across social media. The outrage from the religious community was particularly intense. Bayside had always been a city with a conservative streak, and the revelation that such activities were happening under its respectable veneer sent shockwaves through the church-going population. Pastor Samuel Green of Bayside Community Church, one of the city's most influential religious leaders, held a press conference condemning the parties. "This behavior is a betrayal of the sacred vows of marriage," he declared, his voice ringing with indignation. "It is a stain on our community, and we must come together to restore the values that make Bayside strong." The scandal dominated conversations everywhere, at grocery stores, coffee shops, and PTA meetings. People speculated about who might have been involved, their whispers tinged with a mix of curiosity and judgment. The fallout for the participants was swift and brutal. Jake and Melissa, who had hosted most of the parties, became pariahs almost overnight. Jake, once a respected businessman, was forced to step down from his position at a local firm after clients began pulling their contracts. Melissa, who had been heavily involved in the city's charity circuit, was uninvited from every event and blacklisted from organizations she once led. Amanda's name wasn't explicitly mentioned in the article, but enough details pointed to her involvement that it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. I heard through mutual acquaintances that her social circle had dwindled to almost nothing, with even her closest friends avoiding her out of fear of association. One particularly shocking development involved Mark, who had tried to pressure me into staying at the party that night. His wife, Lauren, filed for divorce less than a week after the article was published, citing his involvement in the parties as the primary reason. Their split became a spectacle, with Lauren airing her grievances publicly, including details of Mark's repeated infidelities. But the most tragic story came from a couple named Tom and Jessica, who had attended the parties during a rough patch in their marriage. Claire's article had included Jessica's anonymous account of feeling pressured into participating, and when the story broke, Tom confirmed their involvement in a tearful interview on local TV. "We thought it would bring us closer," he said, his voice breaking. "But it only pushed us further apart. I lost my wife to something I thought we could handle together." Their marriage ended shortly after, and Jessica left town, unable to face the scrutiny. While some partygoers vanished from social life entirely, others tried to defend their actions. Jake and Melissa released a statement through their lawyer, claiming the parties were consensual gatherings among adults and that they were being unfairly vilified. But their efforts to downplay the situation only fueled the fire, with critics accusing them of shirking responsibility for the harm they had caused. The story even caught the attention of regional media outlets, with news crews descending on Bayside to cover the scandal. Reporters camped outside Jake and Melissa's house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the couple, while talk shows debated the ethics of marital exchanges and their impact on communities. For me, the experience was bittersweet. On one hand, I felt vindicated. The truth was out, and the network that had caused so much damage to my life and others was finally being held accountable. But on the other hand, the public nature of the scandal made it impossible to fully escape. Everywhere I went, people seemed to recognize me, their glances a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Kevin, ever the optimist, tried to cheer me up. "Hey, at least you're not the bad guy in this story," he said one evening over beers. "If anything, you're the hero." "I don't feel like a hero," I admitted. "I just wanted to move on with my life. But now it feels like I'm stuck in the middle of this mess." "You'll get through it," Kevin said firmly. "You've already survived the worst part. This is just noise." As the weeks passed, the scandal began to die down, replaced by the next big story. But the effects lingered. Some couples managed to reconcile, using the experience as a wake-up call to address the issues in their marriages. Others, like Amanda and me, remained irreparably broken. Amanda reached out to me once, a brief and awkward phone call where she tried to gauge whether there was any chance of forgiveness. But her tone lacked genuine remorse, and I made it clear that there was no going back. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said before hanging up. It was the closest I could come to closure. Looking back, the scandal wasn't just about the parties or the people involved. It was about the consequences of secrecy, the fragility of trust, and the choices we make when faced with temptation. For me, it was a painful but necessary chapter in my life, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward. And while the city of Bayside may never fully recover from the shock of what was revealed, I took comfort in knowing that I had faced the truth head-on, emerging stronger on the other side. The court's decision to award joint custody of our 2 children Emily and Noah, was a bittersweet victory. It was a fair judgment, one that ensured the kids would spend equal time with both parents, but it didn't feel like a win. Nothing about this situation felt like a win. My weekdays with them were precious, but knowing they'd be with Amanda every weekend left me with a knot in my stomach. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of environment she was creating for them now. Emily, 13, was old enough to sense the tension, but not yet mature enough to process it fully. She oscillated between resentment and quiet withdrawal, her anger occasionally bubbling to the surface in passive-aggressive comments. Noah, 9, seemed more resilient on the surface, but his questions were harder to answer. "Why can't we all live together again?" he asked one evening as I tucked him into bed. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Sometimes adults make choices that change things, buddy," I said gently. "But it doesn't mean we love you any less. Your mom and I both want what's best for you and Emily." He nodded, his eyes heavy with sleep, but I could tell he didn't fully understand. How could he? I poured myself into being the best father I could be during the week. Mornings were spent packing lunches and making sure everyone got to school on time. Evenings were filled with homework help, family dinners, and movie nights. I wanted to create a sense of normalcy, even if it felt like I was barely holding myself together most days. The weekends, however, were a different story. When Emily and Noah were with Amanda, the house felt unbearably quiet. I tried to keep busy working on home repairs, picking up freelance projects, and going to the gym, but the silence always crept back in. Amanda's absence was a constant reminder of the betrayal that had upended my life. She had made her choices, and while I was determined to move forward, the scars she left behind refused to heal. Through mutual friends, I learned that Amanda had quickly resumed her social life after the divorce. She was reportedly still attending parties, meeting new men, and acting as if the fallout of our marriage was little more than a speed bump. One evening, a former coworker of hers, Kelly, called me unexpectedly. "I don't want to stir the pot," Kelly began, her tone cautious, "but I thought you should know, Amanda's been. Well, let's just say she hasn't exactly changed her ways." "What do you mean?" I asked, already bracing for the worst. "She's been bringing guys home," Kelly said hesitantly. "Different ones from what I've heard. I just worry about how it might affect Emily and Noah." The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I thanked Kelly for telling me and hung up, my mind racing. The thought of strangers coming in and out of the home where my children spent their weekends filled me with dread. I decided to confront Amanda during the next custody exchange. As she pulled up in her car and the kids hopped out, I gestured for her to step aside. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. "What about?" she asked, her expression guarded. "I've heard things," I said carefully, "about the people you've been bringing around the house." Her face darkened, and she crossed her arms. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is how this affects Emily and Noah. They need stability, Amanda. They need to feel safe." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't lecture me about parenting, Daniel. I'm not doing anything wrong. They're fine." "They're not fine," I said, my voice rising slightly. "They've already been through enough. The least you can do is give them a stable environment when they're with you." "Don't act like you're perfect," she snapped. "You're just bitter because I've moved on and you haven't." Her words stung, but I refused to take the bait. "This isn't about me or you. It's about them. Just think about what kind of example you're setting." The conversation ended with her storming off, and while I doubted my words had made an impact, I hoped they'd at least planted a seed. But as the weeks went by, it became clear that Amanda had no intention of changing her behavior. The reports from mutual friends continued, and I began to worry about the long-term effects on Emily and Noah. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild my own life, though trust was a foreign concept now. I dipped my toes into the dating pool, meeting a few women through mutual acquaintances and dating apps, but every interaction felt shallow and forced. One woman, Lisa, was particularly kind and patient. She was a nurse in her late 30s, with a warm smile and an easy laugh. We went on several dates, and while I enjoyed her company, I found myself holding back. "Is everything okay?" she asked one evening as we walked through a park. "You seem distant." I sighed, struggling to find the words. "It's not you," I said finally. I just I'm not sure I'm ready for something serious. She nodded, her expression understanding but tinged with disappointment. I get it. You've been through a lot. But you deserve to be happy, Daniel. Don't forget that. Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways, but the walls I'd built around my heart were hard to break down. Every time I started to let my guard down, memories of Amanda's betrayal came rushing back, reminding me of how easily trust could be shattered. Despite my struggles, my focus remained on Emily and Noah. I attended every school event, cheered them on at soccer games, and made sure they knew they were loved. Slowly but surely, I began to see the impact of my efforts. Emily started opening up more, sharing her thoughts and feelings during our late-night talks. Noah, ever the optimist, began to thrive in the stability I worked so hard to provide. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Emily looked up from her plate and said, "Thanks, Dad." "For what?" I asked, caught off guard. "For being here," she said simply. "For always being here." Her words brought a lump to my throat, and I realized that, despite everything, I was doing something right. The pain of betrayal was still there, a constant undercurrent in my life, but it didn't define me. My kids were my anchor, and they gave me the strength to keep moving forward. As for Amanda, she continued down her self-destructive path, seemingly oblivious to the consequences of her actions. But I had made peace with the fact that I couldn't control her choices. All I could do was focus on building a better life for myself and my children, a life grounded in love, stability, and the hope that one day, trust might not feel so impossible. Dear viewers, thank you so much for listening to our story all the way to the end. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you exciting tales and creating even more engaging content. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us grow and motivates us to come up with something new and thrilling just for you. Stay tuned. There are many more incredible stories ahead, and together, we'll make our YouTube channel truly unique. Thank you for being with us.